Kansas City is getting a lot of love across the country as an entrepreneurial hotbed, and it's because of organizations like SourceLink. It's episode 60 of the 1004 show. Dara Macon is the Global Director in Business Development. She's been there for about 2 years, and she helps SourceLink, which is a solutions-based consulting company helping communities all across the country grow. We talked about a lot of things, about who actually owns a startup ecosystem, how a startup community can tell their story, and the impact that the culture of that community actually has. So check it out, episode 60. Dara, how are you this morning?
I'm good, thank you.
So you are the global director over at SourceLink. What is SourceLink?
We are an organization that works with, I'll call them communities loosely. So that could be anything from a city to a group of counties or states. But it's really an opportunity for engagement if there is interest in doing intentional work around building entrepreneurial infrastructure and helping entrepreneurs be successful. So when we engage with the community, we really work to understand what their goals are. And we have best practices, we do consulting work, and then we have some software tools that can help in that process.
Intentional, use the word intentional. How do you know if someone's intentional or not? Because to me, it seems like every community across the country is spitting out entrepreneurship or small business growth as buzzwords, but which ones are intentional? How do you guys kind of really understand who is really going after this in that kind of intentional way?
Sure. Well, I have lots of conversations typically with different stakeholders, and sometimes those conversations can go on for quite some time as the community is trying to figure out what role, if any, that they want to play. And when I say intentional, it's doing something that can help break down silos, increase visibility of the organizations that are supporting entrepreneurs. It's looking at gaps in programming or assistance that might be there, and then looking for ways to fill those gaps. So when I say intentional, it's a more thoughtful approach than just a purely organic approach to ecosystems.
In ecosystem building, what type of gaps have you guys found that typically are happening across the country?
Well, depending on the community, it could be something as basic as those silos I referred to earlier. So there's typically when we go in and do an asset mapping as kind of a start to understand what it currently exists, we find that sometimes there are silos or turf wars kind of going on, and oftentimes those organizations are not familiar with what each other's doing, and because of that, oftentimes the entrepreneur does not get referred to the best solution for their current need. So we try and work to help facilitate those conversations. And usually what we do is try and find an organization or a champion in the community that wants to act as that connector or kind of that hub. They don't own the ecosystem. They really work to encourage those conversations, create visibility, not only among the resource partners themselves, but also get the word out to the entrepreneurs that there are typically a wealth of resources available to help them succeed.
So who owns an ecosystem then?
You know, no one individual or organization owns the ecosystem. If you think about the rainforest analogy, for instance, there are lots of things going on underneath the forest that have to work together or feed each other for that forest to be successful. And so this is really true, we feel, in ecosystem building. You need to pull the people out, whether it be the entrepreneurs themselves, investors, the organizations providing programming, and get them playing together.
Oftentimes I find that in my community and in several communities across the country, across the world, people have the best intentions as ecosystem builders, but they haven't necessarily lived that life of a business or being a business owner. How can an organization, or what are some ways that you have seen organizations like yours be able to help fill that gap or make it easier to get that credibility, right? Because I think there's entrepreneurs want to talk to other entrepreneurs and get that information from them. How have you guys been able to fill that gap where others maybe struggle because they haven't lived it being a business owner?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is really having conversations with your entrepreneurs. And so we're a big advocate of the entrepreneurs being part of that conversation. So to give you an example, in Kansas City, a few years ago, they identified a gap around access to capital. And, the lenders were saying there were no good deals, and the entrepreneurs were saying, well, nobody's lending. Well, the reality is once we were able to get those two groups talking, and with an intentional approach to addressing or tackling that gap, they've made some significant progress here in the Kansas City region. So that's just one example.
So in that specific case, you have the entrepreneurs who are trying to raise capital, and then you have the investors or maybe bankers or people who are lending capital who are looking for specific deals. What was the bridge that you guys used to make that, a smaller gap, if you will?
Sure. Well, part of it was starting those conversations and getting the groups in a room together, and then doing an assessment of the landscape. And part of it, too, was just uncovering some funds or some capital that was available. A few years ago, Digital Sandbox is a program that was developed, and that was a focus on early seed funding, and that was missing in the Kansas City community. So, and then back to, encouraging those conversations, and then it's critical to tell the story, celebrate the successes, to talk about it. And so we encourage a gathering of metrics and data to help inform that story.
I know you guys recently put together a kind of jobs impact for the Kansas City area. Some interesting stats: about 17,000 jobs were created over a few years for first-time business owners, is I believe the stat that you guys used?
Actually, it was net new jobs created by young and new firms, and we specifically in Kansas City honed in on companies that were employing 20 or less people. So that was net new jobs. So that took into account attrition in the jobs that were being created. So we feel that that's a pretty impactful story and really supports the economic impact piece of the work that's being done in communities that are embracing entrepreneurship.
So companies that have 20 employees or less, we're seeing an increase of several thousand over a net impact or net new jobs over several years. You're on the 1004 show. The numbers there mean 1,000 companies with 4 employees each. I think it's a very similar kind of concept where you're seeing a lot of companies grow, where you have these small companies, and if you kind of take the traditional way of whale hunting, where you have one company or 4 companies that have 1,000 employees and flip-flop that, you could have 1,000 companies that are doing very similar things with a handful of employees or less than 20 employees and really see a big impact.
Yes.
How are you convincing communities, not just through data, but through different kind of techniques, that this actually is the future? Because I think you guys are starting to really see what we believe in. And so what are some of the ways that you're convincing people that don't believe that that is actually the future?
It's one conversation at a time. And I think, we're in a great situation right now because of all of the emphasis that's been put on the Amazon HQ2. So if you think about all that energy and all that money that's been put into the attraction of one company,
Yep.
There's going to be 239 or so losers in that proposition. So we're really right now feel like the timing with the Kansas City jobs report coming out is very good, because we now can demonstrate the value in the form of traditional, economic impact, jobs, revenues, those type of things, and say, look, a community, for instance, like Wichita, Kansas, they know that there's no way that they were going to be an Amazon city to be, considered.
Yeah.
So what can those type of communities do on an ongoing basis to foster or encourage entrepreneurship and keep the talent that they have in those communities? I think the same thing can translate over into larger communities. The 1 million plus that population that Amazon is looking for. If you think about the economic impact, over time, is it really going to be a positive impact because of all of the things that community is going to have to give away to lure Amazon there? So,
sure.
Yeah, so those are interesting, thought-provoking conversations that I'm having right now.
It's interesting. I believe the Amazon package will be over $1 billion. I think a lot of people believe that. I think, 50,000 jobs, will it really get to 50,000 jobs? A lot of these whale hunts, if you will, never get to those numbers. I believe that there was a community in South Carolina that after a couple of years, the net new jobs that they were created from a package end up being something like $3 million per job. And that just doesn't make sense. And so it's,
Yeah.
Could Amazon be in your backyard? Sure, that would be nice, I guess. But like you said, 200 plus, quote unquote losers. It'll be interesting. What I find most kind of challenging is where communities have said, oh, we're small business friendly, yet they've rallied so hard at recruiting the Amazons of the world, or just Amazon, and how that is really going to affect the small businesses in their communities. I've talked to a lot of small business owners locally in southeastern Virginia and across the country who don't want Amazon in their backyard because it will hurt their business. And I think a lot of people don't understand some of the actual other businesses that Amazon is in, that their community might actually be strong in, that Amazon can come in and absolutely defeat some of those other small businesses. So it's interesting to see how these communities are going after a business like that. Obviously, 50,000 jobs is a lot, so I think that's the big thing. Court a company like Amazon and see what it can do for your community.
Well, I think they call that unintended consequences.
Sure.
Yeah, so the good news is this is stimulating lots of conversations in communities, and I think the great thing about it is, even though there will be one winner and likely many losers, in the short term, is thinking about what these communities, the collaborations and conversations that went on among the stakeholders in those communities. Can they and will they be willing to continue those conversations? Because hopefully in that exploration process, they've looked at the synergies and the energy that was created as a result of it.
So how do you stimulate that conversation to then actually go towards those small businesses? Indirectly from the Amazon HQ, people that were talking about that, who are excited about that, then how do you take that conversation and say, let's take that same attention, look at our data and focus on, the small businesses in your community?
Well, I think I just kind of touched on it. It's okay. Here is these conversations and this financial commitment that was put towards this. Now let's think about how you might be able to leverage that to be focused on your entrepreneur and startup community. And just hopefully those conversations that are coming from it. And for communities that we're already in conversations with or engaged with, hopefully it reinforces, because of all the press and visibility that's come out of this, that they are thinking about a path that is more in their control than being, one of 240 suitors for Amazon.
Sure. I think they're going to Washington, D.C. They already have a footprint there. Bezos owns Washington Post. That's on the record. I think it's going to D.C. or Northern Virginia or the Northern Virginia area. We'll see what happens. So how can someone implement what SourceLink does in their community? What's the kind of process there?
Yeah, so typically we have conversations with interested parties. Oftentimes when we start out, there can be a group that's been having these conversations, and they've been trying to figure out, they know they want to do something, and they've been trying to figure out a path to do that. And I, engage with folks through attending conferences, following social media, getting involved in those conversations, and, reaching out and saying, hey, I noticed that, I saw this article. I see, you've got some momentum or some interest going on there. We're really about supporting all types of entrepreneurs. We've done work in cluster segments. For instance, up in Minnesota, Grow North is focused on the ag and food industry. But most of our work is more broad stroke and helping the entire entrepreneur set, if you will, succeed. So we don't provide any direct programming. What we do is work with that group or that organization that wants to become that connector, that hub, if you will, of activity to support entrepreneurship. And then we typically will start out doing an asset mapping of what exists in your community or in your region, and getting those folks to a workshop or into a conversation and finding out what the community wants to accomplish. Why are they interested in focusing on entrepreneurship? What does success look like to them? And how then that helps us form the way we work with them. So then in that asset mapping process, we also typically will uncover gaps or based on benchmarking and work we've done in over 100 communities, we can say, you might be missing something in this area. And from there, we have some tools. One of them is called the Resource Navigator. It's an online search database that allows entrepreneurs 24/7 access to identify what stage of business they are and what type of help they're looking for.
Is that locally focused, or is that anywhere? The Resource Navigator?
Typically, it's locally focused, but oftentimes there will be some programs or assistance that's not available in that community that may be available in another county or at a statewide level that we recommend be included in that search tool. The other thing that tool does is allow the resource partners, through the use of the tool and also we encourage regular convenings of the resource partners to talk among themselves and to talk about what they're hearing from their entrepreneurs and what's missing between those conversations and the tool. You can start to see what entrepreneurs are looking for in the form of help or assistance and what might be missing in your community. So then as a community, you can decide if you're going, want to tackle that or create a program or pivot, whatever, works for your community. And then we work with the communities on how to tell the story and how to leverage those gaps, and if they are collaborating, there's opportunities then to go after leverage for funding, for programming, those type of things. Because at that point, you not only do you have the support of many organizations in that community, but you also have factual information or data that says, this is the problem and this is what we want to do to address that issue.
I believe it's the SBA tracks some data that isn't necessarily what I would say a business is always tracking. I believe they track money raised, money increased in business top line, hours logged, like with a company one-on-one, and the net new jobs. I'm interested, and you guys did the jobs piece too from a data standpoint. Why is jobs so important to a community and not kind of the profitability of a business? Why is that data point not the one thing that's tracked more of? Because I think as business owners are trying to maximize or eliminate as much risk as possible, having more jobs isn't something that they're necessarily going to do. But yet, from a community and ecosystem and a government perspective, jobs is that one kind of metric that we always track. Why is that the number, and not kind of looking at a business and kind of their sustainability being that kind of important number?
Well, I can't speak for the government, but what I will say is from an economic development standpoint, those are the traditional business attraction retention piece of economic development that gets so much press. We like to joke about, when an entrepreneur hires their first employee, there's no headlines in the newspaper, there's no ribbon cutting associated with it, so there's not that big splash. The reality is, though, even your micro enterprise and your home-based businesses, they're contributing to the overall dynamics of the community. They're paying taxes, they're your coaches, they're engaged, with your arts scene, whatever, but they're very involved in their community, and they have a vested interest overall in helping that community thrive. So when we work with communities, we talk also about the softer things, if you will, around the importance of entrepreneurship, and we talk about different metrics that we think are important. Is how connected is the community? What type of access to capital do your entrepreneurs have if they need it? So there's a lot of other measures, but for purposes of the SBA, we have several clients that do need to report on those indicators, and so we try and blend both the demographic and the psychographic, and then the economic data. And one way we do that is by encouraging communities to run a hotline or a triage center, a concierge service, sometimes it's called. And that's where they're really engaging one-on-one with the entrepreneur. And once those conversations occur and that trust is built, and the entrepreneur sees that they truly are getting assistance, and then they are more likely then to start sharing some additional information that helps inform the overall picture about the ecosystem.
Very cool. Talking with Dara Macon. I appreciate your time so far. JoinSourceLink.com. I like that. Softer data points in business are kind of some different things that communities can look at. You talked a little bit about the community story and how communities can tell a better story. What are some best practices that they can do to shed some light on what their city or community is doing?
Well, one way is through sharing those success stories and convenings or meetups, and talking with your entrepreneurs, and then figuring out a way to share that story through the newsletters, or contacting your local newspaper to say, hey, we've got this startup weekend going on. There's some cool things. Can you cover it? So social media certainly is a great way to quickly, easily, and not with too much time associated with it, celebrate. It's really important, the celebration piece, because that's also what can encourage others that have been thinking about entrepreneurship to say, well, if other people are succeeding and making it in our community, then they might be more likely to step up and take the risk associated with starting their own business.
Let's talk a little bit about the culture of a community. You live in Kansas City. A lot of people are starting to call it kind of the entrepreneurship hub because of Kaufman and several other events that you guys are doing, obviously SourceLink being there. How important is that kind of entrepreneurial community there, but then also layering that with a food scene, so having really strong food with you guys, barbecue most likely, some sports teams and pride around that. How does that whole kind of infrastructure in a community really help the ecosystem of the entrepreneurial world?
Well, I think for Kansas City, it's a very giving community. And you think about the roots of Mr. Kaufman and the ties, you know, and the things that he did and the passion that he had. And his story is phenomenal in and of itself, his entrepreneurial journey. So I think we are a community that has lots, I think I read the other day, over 7,000 nonprofits all total. So it's a giving, yes. I know, it's pretty amazing. Now, not all of those are involved in entrepreneurship, but just the fact that that is the DNA, if you will, of Kansas City. And I think, you know, having some of our roots in early on with, you know, the United States, and you had your pioneers, and there's a good work ethic and everything associated with the Midwest in general, not just Kansas City. So we've tried to work to leverage that. You know, this entrepreneurial ecosystem building stuff doesn't happen overnight. And in Kansas City, they've been doing it since 2003. So it didn't just, you know, they didn't wake up one day and say, hey, you know, we want to be really great at entrepreneurship in Kansas City. It took some time breaking down those silos, getting those conversations and collaborations going, and then telling the story of the success.
What are some things that you guys talk a lot about in kind of business communities that doesn't make it to the press, that doesn't make it to that next level so that people are talking about it? What are some kind of like behind, under the radar, whether it's strategies or things in the future that you're seeing that don't always get talked about that you think are really, really important?
Well, I think in general, our philosophy is that whoever the group is, or the lead connector or hub in a community, you really need to be humble and be able to take a step back. It's not about you. So I think, you know, being humble, but yet creating an environment where you can support the organizations that are doing the work is really critical. And then, as I mentioned earlier, getting your entrepreneurs involved, getting them excited and getting them energized, and seeing some success because the ecosystem is communicating and collaborating and working more closely. That also can, you know, we see feeds off of itself. So they're little things that build over time that can end up in some more formal successes, you know, that you might read about or hear about.
I'm a business owner. Why should I care about getting involved in my business community?
Well, because as a business owner, you need customers, and you need to have a thriving economy. And I think that those business owners are, you know, directly involved with the success of a community economically. And so unless you are, you know, totally exporting, you may not need local customers, but you need the other support mechanisms that are going on in that community to thrive. So, you know, paying it forward, or understanding, I think, what's going on outside of your world, bringing your head up out of your business to really think about the impact. So, and then, you know, if you want to grow your business, then you certainly want a community that has talent that you need to pull from. So there's, I think, a whole host of things to think about as an entrepreneur.
I obviously believe in community building ecosystems, but sometimes people need to know why they should get involved themselves. Let's talk about a little bit about you individually and some things that you like as kind of best practices, what is your favorite book, business or not?
Oh, wow. I don't know that I have an absolute favorite book right now, but I can tell you that I follow Simon Sinek a
Okay.
lot.
Yep.
It always, to me, gets back down to whether in business or in your personal life, that why, what's really driving somebody, and taking the time and having the interest in really understanding other people's perspectives. I think is huge. So I read or read his stuff. I follow his blog and his little video clips that he does.
They're good.
And
They're
yeah,
good clips. What is your why?
what is my why? I believe in helping others achieve or reach their potential. I believe when that happens, it comes back in a very positive way. And so, uh, business development, you really have to have a curiosity and an interest in others. And that interest for me is in helping others succeed.
It's powerful. What's your favorite quote to live by?
Oh boy.
These are the
You
hard ones.
Yeah, I know. Um, well, it's probably Simon Sinek's about the why. I find myself bringing that up a lot over the last few years since he came out with that.
Have you ever met him?
No, but I would love to.
Well, I'm going to text him. I don't know him personally. I'm going to send him this clip and say that you want to meet him, and maybe it'll happen. What? So,
No, I just used that quote in a presentation a month or so ago. So,
we put on an event called Leap. It's a business obstacle course, and one of the videos that we show is his TED talk about the why. Um,
yeah.
Other than SourceLink, what is your favorite tool to use in business?
Wow. Well, I just I like my phone. It's
What?
mobile,
Okay, what phone do you
and
have?
I have an iPhone
Okay.
6. So it gives me portability. I like to listen to podcasts. I power walk in the morning. Now that it's gotten down in the 30s in the morning, I'm not going to be doing that for a while. But my favorite, there's two or three podcasts that I download. One's in marketing, one's in business, and one's in leadership.
Let's go
And
deeper.
so,
What are those three?
oh, there's one that's called B2B marketing,
Okay.
for instance. And then I enjoy listening to the interviews. There's a gentleman by the name of Peter Bregman that he interviews a lot of people that have written books about leadership and different topics. And so I get my 20 to 30 minute fix every morning.
Very cool. There's a
Kind of
guy.
gets me
There's
going.
there's a guy in my community that has a podcast called the Marketing Book Podcast. Sounds very similar to B2B marketing.
Yeah. I just came across that recently,
Oh,
and yes, about a month ago, and I've listened to a couple of his interviews.
that's awesome. I know him, so I can actually text him that.
Let him know, yeah.
The leadership, and then what was the other one? The podcast, the other two?
Oh, I like to listen occasionally to Anthony Iannarino.
Okay.
He's all about, he's into a lot about the sales and business development area. And so since I spend a lot of time in my role
What's
as
his
business,
called?
his name is Anthony Iannarino.
But his podcast, what's that called?
Oh, that's a good question. In
Oh,
the arena.
in the
In the
arena.
arena,
Cool.
I think he calls it.
And then the
And
third
then,
one?
yeah, I listen to SBI. They do a lot of cool interviews.
Okay.
They're out of Texas, I think
Is
Dallas.
that Small Business Insight?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Very cool.
So,
What should people know about SourceLink that they don't know?
well, I think from a lot of conversations that I have, I think sometimes we get pigeonholed as a software technology solution company, and really we are a solutions consulting company that happens to have some software tools to help the community succeed. So I think if anything, just understanding that we've got all this work we've done with lots of communities, we've been able to benchmark and we see best practices because we're constantly talking with our communities about what's going on. And so I think it's that breadth of expertise that we can bring to the conversation. And then, by the way, we have some tools, some software tools that can help you accomplish some things.
If you guys are interested, you guys can check out joinsourcelink.com. They are a solutions consulting company.
Thank you.
And we just talked to Dara Macon. I really appreciate your time today. Will the Chiefs, this last question, will the Chiefs make the playoffs, win this, and go to the Super Bowl, and then win the Super Bowl?
They are definitely going to make the playoffs. We've got to get by this thing with Pittsburgh. I don't know what it is about Ben Roethlisberger, but I think we're on the right track. Our defense needs to pick up the pace a little bit, but if the offense keeps going, we could go to the Super Bowl.
I see it happening. Super Bowl 52. The Chiefs are going to be there like it's Super Bowl, I think 3 is the last time they were there, maybe.
Yeah, well, we had the Royals win the World Series, so now the Chiefs need to step up to the plate for us.
There you go. I love the plug. Kansas City Pride. Dara, thank you for your time. Look, you guys check out joinsourcelink.com.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.